Hello students, welcome to today's session. Today we are doing a very interesting play called Puku Falls Sick. But first tell me, do you remember what a play is? Well, you are correct. A play is a writing that has dialogues in it. Right? So in our play, Puku Falls Sick, there are some characters starting with Puku, her mother, the doctor, and Mr. Bright, the scientist who is also their neighbor. So, are you excited for the play? Let's go. It is morning. Puku is sleeping in bed, and her mother, Mrs. Roy, comes to wake her up. Good morning, Puku, dear. It's time to go to school. Puku, my stomach hurts, mother. Mrs. Roy, oh dear, let me call the doctor. The doctor comes and examines Puku. Doctor says, Puku seems to have caught a stomach problem, Mrs. Roy. Mrs. Roy, but doctor, she only ate home-cooked food for dinner. Doctor, are you sure none of it was contaminated? Puku, what is meant by contaminated, doctor? Doctor, when a food item mixes with something unclean, we call it contaminated. It becomes impure. Contaminated food can make us sick. Puku, oh, thank you for letting me know, doctor. The doctor gives Puku some medicine and leaves. Mrs. Roy is feeding Puku some soup. Puku looks tired. Mrs. Roy, did you eat anything unhygienic at school yesterday, Puku? Puku, not at all. I just ate my lunch after the games period. That was all. Mrs. Roy, did you say you ate after coming back from the games period? Puku, yes. Mrs. Roy, and did you wash your hands before eating? Puku, well, no, I did not. My hands looked clean. Mrs. Roy, oh dear, what looks clean might not always be clean. Puku and Mrs. Roy are at Mr. Bright's science lab. Mr. Bright is a scientist and their neighbor as well. They are carrying a basket with both stale and fresh bread. They stand in front of a microscope. Mrs. Roy puts a piece of fresh bread under the microscope. Puku looks through it. Mrs. Roy, can you see the little spots on the bread? These are tiny bacteria, and there are very few of them on this piece because it is fresh. She takes the fresh piece of bread out and slides in the stale piece. Puku, oh my, there are so many bacteria on the stale piece. Mrs. Roy, aren't there? Now look at my hand through the microscope. You will again see only a few of them. Puku looks through the microscope again. Puku, that is right. Mrs. Roy bends over and slides her hand on the floor. Mrs. Roy, look at my hand. I touched the floor, but does it look dirty? Puku, no, it doesn't. Mrs. Roy, now let's look at it through the microscope. Puku, ouch, I can see so many of them now, mother. Puku and Mrs. Roy are in the living room. Mrs. Roy, although my hand looked clean, it had a lot of germs on it after I touched the floor. If I eat fresh bread with the same dirty hand, the germs get onto the bread and into my tummy. There they grow and make me fall sick. Puku, just like eating stale bread does? Mrs. Roy, absolutely right, Puku. And if you want to be healthy, it is important that you wash your hands every time before eating. Puku, I will, mother. I don't want to keep falling sick and miss all the fun at school. Mrs. Roy, you got my point. Puku and Mrs. Roy high-fived each other. Oh wow, what a lovely story. Now let's discuss some word meanings to better understand our play. So, are you ready? Let's go. The first word we have is examine, which means to look at somebody or something closely to see if there is anything wrong. Next word, impure, meaning not pure or clean. Excellent. Next word is stale, which means no longer fresh and pleasant to eat, dirty and smells bad. Next word is unhygienic, meaning not clean and therefore likely to cause disease or infection. Next word is microscope, which is an instrument that makes very small things look bigger. Our last word is bacteria, which are tiny living things that we can't see, but they exist in large numbers in air, water, and soil, as well as in living and non living things. All right, great job, children. Come, it's time to look at some questions from the play Pukku Falls Sick. So, are you ready? Let's go. First question is, why did Pukku fall sick? The answer to that is Pukku was sick because she ate her lunch without washing her hands after coming back from the games period. Well done. Our next question is, was Mrs. Roy's hand clean even after she touched the floor? Give reasons for your answer. So, are you ready for the answer? Here it is. No, Mrs. Roy's hand was not clean, even though it looked clean. When she put her hand under the microscope, many bacteria were seen. All right, children, excellent job doing the lesson Pukku Falls Sick. I hope you had as much as fun as I had reading the play. Come back next time for more exciting poems, stories, and plays. Till then, take care. Goodbye.